From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Infrastructure is such a foundational piece to everything that we know in terms of our quality of life that we can't take it for granted.
I like to define infrastructure as the arteries of our community. It includes our water lines for domestic use, drinking, bathing, cooking.
Everything from transit to sewage services. You really don't know it's there until it's not.
You see on the news every day, water main breaks and sinkholes coming up. Without the infrastructure, our society will not function. It will crumble.
Don't take it for granted.
Everybody's using it. Everybody should pay for what they use.
We frankly are living off the infrastructure of our grandparents.
What are we investing in? We're investing in our future. We're investing in our kids.
Good infrastructure decisions will serve us for decades, and bad infrastructure decisions will burden us for a generation.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to the 25th season and this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, the bipartisan infrastructure deal. Here to talk more about it is Daniel Linzell. Dr. Linzell is the Associate Dean for Graduate and International Programs in the College of Engineering at UNL. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks
Welcome.
for having me, Kathy. It's good to be here.
I want to ask you, how do you define infrastructure?
I define it as everything that surrounds you from the moment you wake up till the moment you go to sleep and while you're sleeping. So it's akin to one of the sound bites that ran at the beginning of the show. It's really the fabric, the arteries that kind of hold together our country, our society, and really hold together the world. It's everything that's built that helps us live our lives, in my opinion.
And to give viewers an idea, we put together a graphic that we're going to run here.
Okay.
You said every aspect of our lives, and it is true. When we take a look at this graphic, it's eye-opening.
Yeah, I mean, it includes things you wouldn't think about. I think traditionally, like broadband, that's one of the items that's in the new Transportation Act. It includes parks, infrastructure that people use to exercise on and in. It includes things that you don't think about. Again, kind of alluding to one of the opening sound bites, you don't think about it until things go wrong, such as your water supply, your heat, your air conditioning. So it's all encompassing, and I think what people traditionally think is infrastructure, roads and bridges are very important, but it's much more than that.
U.S., one of the wealthiest countries in the world, Dan, and yet we receive a C- in this area.
Yeah.
Why?
The C- was assigned by the American Society of Civil Engineers. That's our professional society, or my professional society, the society that deals with infrastructure. And the C- is a reflection, I think, of a long-standing thought process or philosophy as it relates to infrastructure, where we don't think about it until it fails. And the way infrastructure has been funded, and especially the upkeep of infrastructure has been largely static since the interstate system was built. And so I'm talking about traditional transportation infrastructure, but it really reaches much further than that. Traditionally, I'll focus on transportation, roads and bridges. Those entities have been funded via gas taxes. And those gas taxes have not necessarily reflected the usage of our infrastructure, the way deterioration accelerates over time. So once something starts to fall apart, it falls apart more quickly. And then other aspects of infrastructure that were shown on that list are funded using a hodgepodge of sources. So a combination of federal, state, local funds, as well as public and private funds, and there really isn't structure set up that, or hasn't been structure set up that allows for those particular entities to necessarily work super efficiently to address needs. So it's a combination, I think, of well-intended processes that over time have not necessarily addressed the speed with which and the magnitude with which our infrastructure is aging and advancing also,
Right.
and needing attended to.
Right, an invitation really for things to go wrong. And we have another graphic that we want to put up for our viewers. These are just some pretty basic examples.
Yep.
Tell us what you're thinking here.
Yeah, I mean, so this infrastructurereportcard.org is a great website to go to get some very interesting information about infrastructure. So water main break every 2 minutes. That just in and of itself shows that what's called our buried infrastructure, which is water lines, sewage lines, many of those were put in even before our interstate system was built, and the way they're constructed utilized the materials that were prevalent at the time, and that really weren't necessarily built with the intention of lasting upwards of 100 years. Growing wear and tear on our nation's roads, I think everybody in Nebraska understands what that means. You know, the pothole hatch that happens every spring is continuing to increase. And then the inventoried levees, there are levee systems all over the place. I think certainly in Nebraska we recognize them, we're aware of them, and so the number of levees that need to be located and whose health needs to be established continues to grow.
Okay. You've referenced Nebraska a few times, but I want you to talk a little bit, especially when we're thinking about this C-,
Yeah.
you know, for the country. How does Nebraska fit into all of that? How are we doing really?
We're doing about the same. Maybe a little bit better, I would say maybe a C. If I remember correctly from the ASC.org site, I'll give you one example. About 10% of our bridges are classified as structurally deficient, and that's a classification that the Federal Highway Administration gives to bridges. So it's about 16,000 bridges. And what structurally deficient means is that those bridges cannot handle the loads that they were designed for due to deterioration, right? And so those structures either are closed or you have to limit the loads to travel across them. And they do need repairs to be able to get back to what they were designed for in terms of load carrying capacity. So 10% of our bridge population being classified as structurally deficient is something that is not minuscule at all. And there are certainly other bridges that haven't reached that classification yet that are headed in that direction in our state. So certainly our Department of Transportation does a lot with the resources that they have and does a very good job, but there's just a lot of things that need to be done in association with the transportation infrastructure. And again, there's these other pieces to infrastructure that also need attended to or upgraded or extended that require additional resources.
If you were to come up with one or two more ideas, what would you say, again, specific to Nebraska?
In terms of things that need attended to? Yeah, so I would say, and this is a part of the bill, and I mentioned it when all of the topics scrolled, broadband, so internet. We have what's called a last mile problem, which is getting internet from the road to the house in rural Nebraska. And so that hasn't traditionally been thought of as infrastructure per se. But when you think about it, it really is, especially now, during the pandemic. And so that's a piece where we have a huge need, a need that Governor Ricketts has recognized, to make sure that everybody in Nebraska can access fast, reliable internet. So that's another example. I would say a third example would be our power grid, to make sure our power grid is resilient. We don't want what happened in Texas to happen in Nebraska. But we were affected by what happened in Texas. Our utility bills are going to go up considerably, at least depending upon your supplier. My utility bills are going to go up considerably this winter as a result of what happened in Texas and reallocation of the power grid to help them out. So, making sure that our power grid is resilient enough to ensure that that doesn't happen, and that we can also handle situations in other states that will affect us, like what happened in Texas last winter. So those are some examples.
Well, we're hopeful now. On November 5th, Congress signed the bipartisan infrastructure deal. Then on the 15th, the president right?
Yep.
Bill into law, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act.
Yes.
All right. So for someone watching who wants to know a little bit more about that, how would you, in this kind of a conversation, explain that to somebody?
So I would say that the intention of this transportation bill is to address a lingering problem that we have with our traditional infrastructure, the things that I mentioned before, roads, bridges, dams, buried infrastructure, right? Things that I think most people would think of when they hear that term. But it is also addressing very timely needs, such as the last mile with broadband, but also enhancing the resiliency of this new infrastructure paradigm, really, which is being defined via this bill, enhancing its resiliency against extreme events. So I mentioned the weather in Texas, right? Here in Nebraska, the 2018 floods are a perfect example of an extreme event that this bill is trying to address by not only allowing us to catch up a bit in association with lingering needs, but also to ensure that we build into whatever is done, be it roads, bridges, airports, right? Again, power supply, that those items are resilient and that they're able to last for a long time. And also another key component is energy sources. So ensuring that we have a robust series of entities that can supply energy. So green and renewable energy, right? Ensuring that we have adequate green and renewable supplies, but we do that in a fashion where traditional jobs that were associated with harvesting resources that are used for energy to produce energy now are not lost, and those individuals are able to then work in the renewable energy space per se. Another aspect of the jobs piece is if we're doing a lot of major construction projects, that's going to require a lot of individuals to complete. So, so there'll be a lot of jobs associated with many components of this bill. Just think about all of the individuals who would be needed to ensure, again, this last mile is completed, really.
Right.
So I would say it's an all-encompassing bill that is redefining what infrastructure is and means, and the results of these activities will touch everybody every day, whether you know it or not.
Let's drill down into some of those components. We've talked recently on this program about climate change and the supply chain, and in fact, you were here about 3 years ago talking about bridges, so I would imagine you're pretty excited to see that coming to the forefront. So I want to begin there with bridges and roads. And again, you know, there's quite a price tag on this thing, but at the end of the day, what is our return on investment when it comes to the bridges and roads piece?
So I would say, I can't put a dollar figure to that, but Nebraska, we feed the world, and we're at the crossroads of the lower 48, really. And so, you know, traditional transportation infrastructure is incredibly important to us, roads and bridges, not only to help goods pass through our state to other parts of the country, but also to help us get our product, which again, we feed the world, to the world. And so being able to improve our infrastructure and maintain our infrastructure, especially our rural infrastructure, which is a part of the activities that we spoke about 3 years ago, is very, very important. I think back to the floods, right? And to the bridge that was washed out up by Niobrara. And, you know, there were some horrible things that happened as a result of that. And one of the lingering after effects was that people had to reroute. To cross the Niobrara required, I believe, about a 100-mile detour. So think of that affecting the ability with which our population, our people, can get what they produce to the world. So ROI in association with this activity, in a traditional sense, roads and bridges, will drastically, in my opinion, improve the confidence that we all have associated with getting our goods, what we use to feed the world, to to market into the world.
Okay. Climate change, public transit, greenhouse emissions, right? So talk a little bit about what that's really going to mean.
So we like our cars in the U.S., right? And that's the way it's been. But I think if we're able to enhance our public transit system, to the point where it's available, its capacity has been increased by making it more extensive, right? And I think more importantly, well, as importantly, the reliability has improved to a point where if I go and I'm going to take a light rail from here downtown, and it says it's going to show up at 407, I know it's going to show up at 407. And when I get on that light rail, I can continue to do what I was doing before I got on the light rail. Meaning if I want to work, I continue to work. If I want to watch, my phone, I can do that, that there's wireless available on that train that's reliable, fast, all that good stuff. So that would encourage me to use public transportation and would take my car off the road and reduce greenhouse gases. Another component to the greenhouse gas piece is the energy piece that I mentioned before. If we're able to, again, develop and support and grow reliable alternative energy sources that will really complement traditional sources, honestly, for a while, then that in and of itself would reduce the amount of greenhouse gases and prevent, I believe, events like the 2018 floods, hopefully, from happening again.
Okay. Improvement of airports and ports, which of course play into the supply chain.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
So the supply chain is, one thing I like to say about engineers is our definitions of things are not very creative. They are what they are, right? So the supply chain is a chain, basically. And so if you think about getting what you want to buy your loved ones for Christmas to you in time to get it to them, to hand it to them for Christmas, stuff will be produced probably overseas, so it needs to go from the factory to a truck, probably to another truck, to a ship, probably to another ship, to a port, to a truck, probably to another truck, maybe onto a train, then to a truck, and to the store, then to you. Every one of those is a link in the chain, and so just like a chain, if one link fails, the chain falls. And so we have certain chains in our supply network that haven't necessarily broken, but are close to breaking, such as our ports, where we see footage. I was on the East Coast last week, and you look off the beach, and you see ships parked everywhere. I was near Savannah. So eliminating those types of bottlenecks, those possible linkage breaks, is incredibly important. And so this bill will increase the size of ports, increase their ability to bring in larger ships with more cargo, increase the ability for more trucks to come in and get that material from the ships and start to move them around on our transportation network. Same can be said for airports, increasing let's say, the size, the length of the runways at Epley. More planes can land if you're able to also improve the technology. Larger planes can land carrying more cargo and helping out with the supply chain.
Okay, what else when we think, again, specifically about Nebraska? Those are great examples that you've given. What are some of the other items, in your opinion, that the bill is addressing that would have our viewers going, oh yeah, I'm a little bit more interested now, right? You've mentioned broadband.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked a whole lot about water.
Yeah.
So that might be a good area. But what else is coming to mind for you?
Well, so certainly water supplies, ensuring that water is safe to drink and is reliable is important. I keep bringing up the floods, but the floods, a lot of our water treatment plants and our sewage treatment plants are located right next to rivers for obvious reasons. And so, so being able to make sure that those supply systems and then the systems that take away the sewage are reliable and trustworthy, and that we're able to feel confident when we take a drink of water that it's safe. We take that so much for granted, and we're so lucky to be able to do that. So that's another example. I would say, another example where extreme weather, I think, could lead to issues that affect infrastructure in Nebraska and in the middle of the country is, if you remember the derecho that went through Iowa and really caused a lot of devastation there, can the rural infrastructure withstand something that severe? And to the point where farmers are able to confidently say, I can store my materials and I can, again, get them from my silo that withstood this event to market. Other examples could include, again, I can't help but say the power supply system. I mentioned that before too, but there's a last mile associated with that as well. And ensuring that that part of infrastructure that is in certain instances owned privately, owned publicly, right? Combination thereof, ensuring that those entities work well together and that they are able to maintain that system to the level that we're hoping to get the transportation system to in terms of maintenance and making sure that it's up to date. That's a major aspect of this bill that really hasn't received a lot of attention.
Cost of all this about what, $1.2 trillion. Not surprisingly, the reaction has been, across the board.
Right.
Curious to how you feel about that.
It's a big number.
Is it big enough?
No,
do you think?
I don't think it's big enough. We're really still playing catch up with that number, honestly, in relation to, again, the traditional forms of infrastructure and getting them to the point where we can say, okay, they're resilient. They can resist a severe weather event or some sort of extreme event 100 years from now, right? Something like that. And so American Society of Civil Engineers indicated that over a 10-year period, we would need to invest to get the infrastructure to where we need. We would need to invest, I believe, double that amount, if not more, just over a 10-year time frame. And we're talking about infrastructure that was put in, again, 50 to 100 years ago. So it's a lot of money. I understand that. But again, we're still playing catch up. And certainly this will help.
Yeah.
But we're still playing catch up, in my opinion.
Yeah, the reactive piece of that will do it to you.
Yeah.
The one thing, as you were talking, Dan, in just the minutes we have remaining, of all the things we've discussed, safety seems to enter, that word seems to enter. And there's a part of me that thinks, wow, we weren't living on the edge a little bit more than maybe I thought we were in terms of our roads and our bridges and just all those things that you're talking about, ensuring safety. Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah,
and the value of safety.
Well, safety's first and foremost in everybody's mind. So I'll speak to the field that I work in, civil, specifically structural engineering. First and foremost in our codes of ethics, the first thing we list is safety and health of the public. So that has to be paramount in associated with everything that we're doing that is funded via this act. And so it's incredibly important to ensure that happens. And I would say that we're not, I wouldn't say we're living on the edge. I say that we're looking over the edge. I think that, again, I'll go back to the Nebraska Department of Transportation. They do a lot with very limited resources, and they do a very, very good job managing what they can with the resources that they have, what they need to maintain with the resources that they have. So they've done a really good job. Safety is paramount. They understand it. Everybody that works in this arena understands it, and certainly I firmly believe that what will be funded through this act, safety will be first.
Let me ask you this, and we just have 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes. How can Nebraskans expect this to play out? So this has happened now, and they're talking about it, and they've outlined everything. How's it play out? Yeah,
I've thought about that. It's a good question. I think it depends on what entity is funding what, right? So this is a massive bill. We've talked about it. $1.2 million is a lot of money. It's requiring restructuring at the federal level. It's requiring entities to work together in a different way, and maybe formation of new entities at the federal level, state, maybe even local level. So if that's a component, that's going to take longer. If we're talking about putting more money into, let's say, replacing bridges, right, in Douglas County that have been taken out by the floods, those processes are already in place. So So that will happen more quickly. I would say that we would see impact from this bill within a year to 2 years. Not necessarily major impact. We're not going to see a major bridge get replaced over the Missouri per se, not that any of them need it, but we're not going to see that. However, we will start to see effects from the bill in association with, okay, maybe this road that had a blind curve is now getting fixed, right? To, again, help people travel more safely. So I think it depends on the project, but I do think we'll probably start to see some of the effects of the bill again within a year to 2 years. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Talking today about the bipartisan infrastructure deal with Dr. Daniel Linzell. I want to go to a graphic for people who are wanting more information, because I think this is good. And you mentioned this too, and I thought this was a pretty interesting website myself, infrastructurereportcard.org. whitehouse.gov, and we got about 20 seconds. You had another one.
Yeah, so it's the American Society of Civil Engineers site, asce.org, and you can find the infrastructure report card there and find out a lot of information about every state in the country and what they feel the condition of all these infrastructure components is.
Dan Linzell, thank you so much for being here and sharing
You're welcome.
your time and your expertise. Thanks to our students who are working so hard behind the scenes, and of course to all of you for watching. As we close, a look at Chalco Hills Recreation Area in Sarpy County, as seen through the lens of Zach Hill, a senior here at UNO. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at nebraskapublicmedia.org/considerthis. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.
It is the longest-running Omaha-based statewide television program on the air today. Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt, producer and host of Consider This. Now in our 25th season, we wish to acknowledge those who have made this educational journey possible. Our guests, underwriters, student crews, the Knowledge Network, the University of Nebraska at Omaha, and of course, viewers just like you. Thank you for watching.